Hello everyone, I'm Tom, this is Arnold.
Hello.
This is episode 5 of our little movie club. Films we're going to be talking about today are The Day the Earth Caught Fire, Possum, Broadcast Signal Intrusion, The Crow, Bacurau, The Stylist, Scream 5 and Wrong Turn. So I'm going to start today with The Day the Earth Caught Fire. This was directed and co-written by Val Guest, also written by one of the best names I've ever heard, Arnold, Wolf Mankiewicz. Imagine your name being called Wolf. Very good. Starring Edward Judd, Janet Moreau and Leon McKern. This film is from the 60s, and it's basically, the basic plot is that 2 nuclear bombs have gone off, test-wise. They're testing these nuclear bombs, and it's caused the planet to come off its axis, and the world's getting hotter, and everything's falling apart because how hot the world is. And I really liked it. I really did like it because it's from 1961, and the opening shot is like London, just completely sort of deserted, and the Thames has all dried up. And what they've done as well, because obviously it's in black and white, they've done like the beginning is like sepia, so it's like that yellowy kind of tint.
Yeah.
And then they go back, and like we find out how we've got to this point, and it's quite good because it's weird that like a film from the 60s is talking about, especially the early 60s, is talking about sort of climate change. There's a moment where a character says something like, "People of Earth have had it good for so many years," and it's like, "How are you talking about this in the 60s?"
The human race has been poisoning itself for years with a great big smile on its fat face.
It's also more sort of relevant now, the fact that in the UK we've had the hottest time ever. It's still quite hot today, so yeah, it's really good. As well, there's all this talk of sort of cover-ups and the US and Russia, and there's probably that Cold War sort of thing, even though I think this was kind of before the Cold War sort of. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's very similar to that episode of The Twilight Zone where the Earth is moving closer to the sun, and then the twist is that it's actually moving further away. Do you remember that episode?
I vaguely remember
it.
Yeah.
It's nice to go back and watch something from like the 60s and, still enjoy it. Pacing wise, it does have that 60s-ness where it's like, it's a bit slow. Sometimes it's Miranda-ing,
It's a sign of the times, essentially.
Yeah. But I did quite enjoy it.
What did you think about the acting style in particular?
I like the acting.
Was it a bit melodramatic?
There's one actor, I think it's, where did I write it down? Leo McKern, I think who it is. And he's I haven't seen him in anything, but he's got that very sort of like, because it's set in a newspaper office, so they're all journalists, and it's got that sort of, he's just got that very British, like, I'm a British man sort of 60s thing.
The stupid, crazy, irresponsible bastards.
There's not really much, because like a lot of these films, they ain't really that complicated.
No.
If you know what I mean.
No.
But for a disaster movie,
I mean,
really
with
good.
such a, sort of a novelty concept of that at the time, you kind of have to have a simplified plot in order to reach the audience. So, yeah.
I think nowadays, I'd say probably the best thing about it is probably the effects and the miniature work. It reminds me somewhat of the BBC adaptation of 1984. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That's got Peter Cushing in, I think. Yeah, really good film. Honestly, I'll just be repeating myself if I keep going on. So, yeah, The Day the Earth Caught Fire. I recommend it.
It's like we're on fire as well.
Also, I want to just point out, it has a very ambiguous ending, which I haven't really seen anything from the 60s which sort of has this sort of really dour sort of ending, because they normally, with the 60s, everything's fine by the end, but kind of a spoiler, but everything isn't fine at the end.
No.
So
that's good. I like that.
If you're not really into your 60s films or older films, it might feel like a drag, but I enjoyed it quite a lot. So yeah, Day the Earth Caught Fire, directed by Val Guest.
So I watched a film called The Crow, 1994. It's directed by Alex Proyas, starring Brandon Lee, Rochelle Davis, and Honey Hudson. It's a pretty simple revenge flick, really. It's basically about a couple that's brutally murdered, and somehow, for some reason, a crow brings back Eric Draven, which is Brandon Lee's character, alive to exact vengeance. It was alright.
I've seen this as well.
Yeah, you've seen this as well. It's okay. I mean, it's just one of those films that tried to capitalise the success of Batman 1989, and there's a lot of moments and sort of large influences. It's like the whole like look and style. It's like it's trying so hard to be Gotham City. It's a bit too much. There's a lot of weird shots as well, and it gets into the whole whole of idea of is Brandon really in this shot or is he not in this shot? And I think that's the whole like why I was interested in watching this film in particular, because the film itself, it's like, I think the trouble with this film, it's like it's become a cult success only because of what happened behind the scenes. So I think if Brandon Lee hadn't unfortunately passed away and we didn't have the technological advancements, the CGI inserted in this film, it would have been pretty much forgotten, to be honest. I don't think it would have held up to this day.
I remember being very underwhelmed when I watched it. I think that is what it is. It's that curiosity of how did they finish this film. Being that he was killed.
And surprisingly, there's not much in terms of like CGI being inserted. I mean, I looked at like a video on behind the scenes, and it turned out that Brandon Lee had filmed pretty much nearly all of his scenes. I think the only I've got it in my notes actually. The only bits that was added was reshoots of the scene when he comes back to life. They used the exact same shot. I think it was the bit where he's walking in an alley just as soon as he comes back to life, and they used the same shot when he goes back to his old room, and that's pretty much it really. They use a technique called rotoscoping. Which is pretty much you extract existing footage basically based off the face and then put it into another image, and that's pretty much it.
There's a similar thing. I might be getting this wrong, but it's kind of like there's a similar thing called masking, where you sort of cut round a person.
Essentially,
similar to that. Yeah.
There's a weird misconception that people used to think that it was actually a computer animated Brandon Lee, but it's not. It's weird. I don't know how people think that, but it's only that bit, and there's a bit where he looks into the mirror and it's like a cracked mirror. That's CGI'd. But other than that, that's pretty much it. It's it's not as tampered as I thought it would be. But the trouble with the film, it's the rewrites of the script, because especially towards the ending, it does feel very rushed. Now, there's a character I forgot to introduce. It's played by Rochelle Davis, and she plays a character called Sarah. She was the girl that was looked after by the couple that was brutally murdered. And there's a scene where she gets captured by the villain. The villain's great, by the way. I think he's played by, what's his name, Michael Wincott. He's got a great voice, very like Kurt Cobain sort of vocals, very weird. He essentially kidnaps her, but the way the sort of ending works out is that for some reason the crow can almost hear, the girl screaming out of nowhere, and it's so convenient. It's like, oh, I know where she is. She must be inside the church. And then you've got the next scene where the cop comes out, which is Ernie Hudson. He comes out of nowhere and manages to save the day. And it's just like, you can tell the script suffers a lot through that. And it's like, it does make you think, what would have been like if it hadn't, been changed due to the unfortunate, circumstances. But even then, I don't think it's one of those films that was remarkable in any way, other than those two, things I mentioned. That's about it, really.
I remember the ending as well, where like they're having a fight on a church, aren't they? On the church roof. That's very similar to Batman 89 when he's fighting the Joker on the top. I think as well you said about Kurt Cobain and that, because when was this, 94?
94.
And it's like maybe there was that bit of sort of like grunginess to it. I mean,
there are scenes where there's bands playing that sort of music as well.
There's the film does have an audience though, because I'm sure there's been like 4 other films, and there's always been talk of a reboot or something. But I remember not really being a big fan of it, and I was kind of looking for. I mean, it's been many years since I've watched it now.
Yeah.
But I remember like looking forward to it, but I remember then just being like, it's just fucking Batman. You know what I mean? I mean, it's fine, it's all right, but it's just, it doesn't feel very.
I mean, there's a moment where each victim, he takes his revenge on. He always leaves like the symbol of the crow, and it's like that is so Batman.
There's a bit.
It's on fire.
Yeah. There's a bit as well. I remember being very sort of like, I think, doesn't he speak to someone at a shop? And
Yes,
then
he
they're
does.
outside. I remember that outside bit like really looking like a set, like really bad.
Yeah.
It might not have been, but the way it looked really fucking cheap, man.
Well, there's a shot where you see the crow, and he's playing guitar on a rooftop, and you can pretty much obviously see that he's playing on top of a model city, and you do have that sense of it's quite cheap, it's a rush production, it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. It's pretty
Crap.
yeah, it is. It's like one of them. It's like, because there is that sort of build up around it, you sort of expect something to be better.
I think because it's heavily embedded in pop culture, there's a reputation with that's attached to the film, and you sort of think, Overall, The Crow, not good.
Is it a middle thumb?
It's more like this.
Ah, it's a down thumb.
Yes.
Oh, we're terrible. Is that it then, yeah?
That's pretty much it.
Who's responsible for last night's act of video piracy?
These video pirates
managed to briefly override broadcast
The
signals on
incident is now under investigation by the FCC.
What was that?
Next one I watched was Broadcast Signal Intrusion. This was directed by Jacob Gentry, written by Phil Drinkwater and Tim Woodall, starring Henry Shum Jr., Kelly Mack and Chris Sullivan. The film is inspired by the Max Headroom Incident. Do you know what that is?
I've heard about that.
Yeah, and also inspired by a YouTube video called Tara the Android. Have you seen that? It's like this weird, like, dummy, and like it's like a. I mean, you probably haven't seen it, have you? Where it's like this weird. It's like one of those weird, creepy YouTube videos that has been going around for years.
It rings a bell.
You'd probably know it if you saw it. But what happens is you have this man who works for like must be like a television agency, and he's backing up old files of like old recordings and all that stuff. And one day he's going through all these old broadcasts, and he sees this like weird like broadcast interruption or intrusion, and he's like, what was that? And he goes into it, and then he sort of like the mystery spins from that, like he investigates it and all that. And for the first half I really did enjoy it, because it really engaged me, because I was like, what's going on? You know, and it's set in the sort of late 90s, 98, so there's a lot of sort of like video cameras from that time, and like old videos.
Old ones we have to like carry and all
Yeah,
that.
and all stuff like that. And just the whole recreation of the Max Headroom Incident, because I don't know if you know, but the second time the interruption happened was during an episode of Doctor Who
on PBS.
And they actually sort of recreate Doctor Who, but not Doctor Who. It's called Don Kronos. And like, I actually think the episode this is fucking some.
This is really sad act stuff. But I actually know what the serial is. It's Horror Fan Rock.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Are you
It's
sure?
Horror Fan Rock.
I swear it's Brain and Morbius.
Really?
Yeah. Give us a sec, ladies and gents. We'll be
Yes.
back. Right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Horror Fan Rock.
Yes.
Right, I actually thought it was Brains and Morbius, because I was gonna say, like, when they recreate the episode, they're not recreating the episode. It's something else. But it's Doctor Who. It actually looked like the fucking set from Brain and Morbius. And I was like, that's so fucking cool.
Like that Frankenstein set.
Yeah. I really loved, to be honest, it annoyed me because the beginning of the film was really good. Like the way they recreated like that 90s
That's
TV.
sick. I'll have to watch that.
It's a good film. Well, you might not want to watch it.
Okay.
But I enjoyed like the mystery of it, where like it's like a noir film. Like it really is well done at the beginning, and it reminded me somewhat of sort of Japanese horror, like The Ring and Pulse and One Miss Call. which I don't know if you've seen any of them. I think
I've
you've
heard
seen
of
the Ring.
Yeah.
But then, halfway through, the mystery and the conspiracy gets so muddled and so all over the place. You're like, right, what's going on? Because like it turns out, because I also another thing to mention is that our main character, his wife has passed away and he's going through like grief and that, and there's all this talk of like a third. I'm going to spoil this because I honestly I don't recommend it because it's. Well, I do recommend it, but go into it just sort of to enjoy it as more technical, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because like there's all this talk of like, oh, there was a third broadcast which was never saved and it's all out there and all that stuff, and it turns out that the third broadcast was actually on a broadcast of his wife who's died, and it's like, if they would have done a thing where this guy is dealing with grief and, you know, he's starting to see things which aren't there, I would have liked it. And there is a bit of that, but not enough. Not enough balance where you're like, right, how much of this is mystery and how much of this is, you know, just him sort of losing it due to grief.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it though. I did enjoy it, but just not as good. The script is well made, but... No, sorry. The film is well made, but the script is messy. Yeah. The script is really messy, and that's what kind of throws me off. And I liked all the performances. I liked Henry Shum Jr., who's the main character, and yeah. But I don't really want to spoil it because I do think people should watch it. But yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm losing momentum as well as the fucking film did, because it's just like, there's something there. There's something in this film which is so good.
It doesn't quite hit the mark.
It doesn't hit it. It doesn't hit it. It nearly does. Like I say, them recreations of 90s films and the recreation Doctor Who, really good, but it really does lose that momentum. If it was trying to do, kind of like what I've just said really, but if it was trying to do something where this is a man who's dealing with grief and this is all in his head and maybe he's took something which is real, like the Max Headroom Incident, even though it's called something else in the film, but like maybe he's took something from real life and it's messed with his head because he loses his job and all that stuff. But no, very, just a wasted opportunity. That's all I can say, just a wasted opportunity. Good idea, good setup, but crap payoff, basically. So that was Broadcasting Intrusion. If you do want to watch it, it's on Shudder.
Thought no one would ever find you. But I found you.
I watched a film called Possum. It was directed by Matthew Holness, and I think he wrote it as well, starring Sean Harris and Alan Armstrong. The idea of the story is about this disgraced puppeteer called Philip. He's come back to his childhood home. This weird dilapidated house. It seems to be on fire. It's falling apart. To revisit his dark past. That involves the stepdad, played by Alan Armstrong, and he has a puppet to destroy, essentially, which has caused his career to go downhill. And the puppet in question, I don't know if I should say what it is, because it's one of those films where it's pretty much about that puppet.
Well, going back about 3 episodes, I think I mentioned this on our second.
Did you mention what the actual prop
I
is?
didn't say. I just said it a prop.
Good.
So I reckon if people watch this, I don't reckon I made sure not to put it in the clips for that episode. So
Yes.
I don't reckon you should say what it is, but try and talk about it if that makes sense.
I won't say what the puppet is, and it's not one of those films where, you know, you'll see the puppet at the very last moment. It's not one of those films. It's better than that. It's just a really well done film. Kind of spoilers, but it's basically about child abuse. But it's just such a beautifully well made film. I think it's shot on 35mm. I think some shots are in 18mm. But yeah, from just the get-go, we're introduced to the character Philip, and he recites a poem from one of his childhood days, and it's like, what's in the box? You know, it's from the get-go, it's so engaging that you want to know what it is. And yeah, what I love about the intro as well is the title sequence, because it's all shot in like old footage. And well, I've written a description here, and it's got this sort of weird green tint, red tint, this sort of like it's weird to describe, actually. It's like weird old photos being manipulated with distortion and like burning holes effects, and the way the film sort of, transitioned from one image to another, and you see like images from like Philip hiding in a little house there. Like that whole sequence is so beautiful. There's another plot as well involving a missing schoolboy, which he meets pretty early on in the film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much like a sort of B plot, but it's mainly about him sort of, going through his sort of childhood past. But the film, it's one of those films you think that there might be a lot of sort of flashbacks, but there really isn't. It's heavily relied on props, not just the puppet itself, but you get like these sort of, these sort of memorable, explosive imagery of like balloons being turned to black. You see those black smoke appearing. These weird little metaphors. You see like a jar of sweets, and from a pretty early on, you're like, it means nothing to you, to the audience. It means nothing until you understand how that particular prop is affected to Philip even in general. It's just a great film, man. What I was really surprised about that, how good the jump scares are, and I didn't think it would be a film with jump scares essentially.
But the good jump scares,
they're very
not like,
well directed jump scares.
Yeah, they're not like the
they're not like
The Conjuring, or like stuff like that.
So with Philip, we get an idea that he's some sort of social pariah, because whenever he's outside and he's around sort of public areas, a lot of people sort of tend to sort of look at him a bit funny, like what's he doing here, or I think he gets called a pervert at one point, and it seems the film sort of tries to imply that it might have been some sort of abuse scandal or something, but it's not. It's him trying to process what's gone through his childhood that's still affected him to this day, and with this whole like destroying the puppet, it's like there's a great scene, and this is one of the jump scares I mentioned earlier. And the way that's set up is so well done. It's the bit where he dumps the puppet in a stream, and then suddenly there's like a weird scene that interjects, and it's like a little weird sort of not a flashback sequence, but it's like weird sort of images from the house and somewhere outside, and he starts panicking, and he's like, where is it? I can't find it. And then it sort of flash forwards to him in his bedroom, and he wakes up and he sees the puppet right there, and it's so well done. Honestly, it terrified me. And I'm not really into like, I don't get scared easily, but it was just like, it was the setup and the payoff that was very well delivered.
Yeah, if you watch this film, Dead of Night, pitch black, it's brilliant,
It's
man.
fucking sick.
I think because I watched this a while ago, so I don't remember too much, that much. But the whole thing about him sort of being like, maybe something happened to him, or he did something which caused people to think he's maybe a pedophile, or something like that. And I thought, wasn't it the case where like he hadn't actually done anything? It was like his dad, or
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers possible. But it was like his dad, or
I was just about to get back in.
Yeah. And
So
also, I just want to mention, just while I remember, is that the whole puppet thing and him trying to destroy it, that might be, but it's kind of obvious when you think about it, but that might be what he wants to get rid of in terms of his life, in terms of the child abuse. He can't let it go, basically.
That puppet is a way of destroying everything bad ever since the fire started at the house, because he was made an orphan because his parents died in the fire, and Alan Armstrong's character, I think his character's called Maurice. He's one who looks after him, and I think he pretty much encourages Philip to help, and we get a weird relationship with these two characters, because he's the sort of one who sort of encourages him to destroy the puppet, But really, the whole twist of the film is the fact that it's because after he's destroyed the puppet, he's still plagued by images, by the dreams of the puppet still haunting him, and it turns out to be Morris because he was the one who was abusing him after all this time. And Flash, we'll skip to the ending, but there's another jump scare as well, and I've written here as a scene because before I think as soon as he sort of starts settling down in the house again, there's a certain room he won't enter. And there's moments where he tries to go in there, but he's sort of like, oh no, maybe not, maybe I'll try again. But I think it's towards the end, he just finally gives in, and he goes inside the room even. And the room is basically where his parents died in the fire. But he sees a jar, and inside the jar is some teeth. You kind of get immersed for some reason. Why is there a jar full of teeth inside? And then out of nowhere comes Maurice, and it's like, oh my god, it was you after all this time. And it's so terrifying, honestly. Great jump scare, and honestly, it's one of those films I will always think about for the rest of my life. It's just so strong in terms of imagery, the props, using props instead of flashbacks. It's so well done. It's like it's brilliant writing in terms of like trying to write a good, engaging story based off two. It's only like two characters as well. Yeah, pretty much. Is even better.
I think from sort of memory, the one thing which kind of did one negative is that I feel like it gets too caught up in its own artiness and its own sort of surrealism. I think it would have been a bit better if some of the film would have been a bit more grounded, but then what the fuck do I know?
Subjective. But the thing is, though, I do agree to an extent because it feels like the film goes on too long. I think there's some sort of weird. I don't think it's in terms of the pacing. It's just like you said. There's a lot in terms of like the montage flashback sequences. It's a bit too much. So yeah, I do think it kind of suffers in that. But it's still a fun, exploration into this character and the sort of dark side he's facing in that. Oh, and the soundtrack's done by the Radiophonic Workshop, which I thought was great because, they're responsible for classic Doctor Who, so that was a nice little...
Yeah. I mean, we haven't mentioned that Matthew Holness plays Garth Marenghi. Whatever. I think I mentioned it in the last video, but that's so strange that it's
I know, it's weird, isn't it? But the thing is that I associate him from a sketch show from the 90s he did with Robert Webb and David Mitchell. And it's like to think he was like playing, various characters in a sketch comedy show to this. Wow, fair play. Yeah, fair play.
Brilliant, man, brilliant. The performance of who's Morris? Who plays him?
Alan Armstrong.
He's unbelievable in this film.
Fantastic.
Like he's terrifying, man.
He really is.
When he towards the end of the film, when he sort of, he's just horrible, and the way he sort of treats Sean Harris's character, it's like he's a grown man, but he treats him like a child.
Yeah. Because they still have that teacher and student relationship.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Was he his teacher? Because I don't remember.
He was his teacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I think he looked after him as soon as his parents passed away. But go back to the ending. It turns out that Maurice is responsible for the schoolboy's disappearance instead of Philip, which is weird. But yeah, that's kind of like it's not really a happy ending, but it's like at least that school kid won't have to go through the same, trouble that Philip did. It's like one of them, so it's kind of a happy ending in a way. But Possum, absolutely fantastic film. I really want more stuff from Matthew Holness. Why isn't he making more films? Hope you do.
Very good. If you're gonna watch this film, don't watch the trailer because it spoils.
Yes. Yeah.
It spoils that prop and puppet you're going about.
There's a lot of thought and love into this film, and it's just it's contagious.
Love it. I also watched Bacurau. This was written and directed by Jornello Dornelles and Kleber Mendonco Fiello. Probably said that wrong, but there you go. Also starring Barbara Cohen, Thomas Anquinto, and Silvero Vieira. I've probably said that wrong, but there we go. This film, well, I'll tell you the plot. It's like this small fictional village of Bacurau, and after their sort of matriarch dies, a lot of strange things starts happening to the village. Like, you've got this corrupt mayor who pops up. The map of the village is not turning up on satellites, and it's just like something's going on outside the village, if you know what I mean. But overall, I honestly loved this film. I really did love it. It's I love the way it's shot. Oh, and also to do with the setting. It's set sort of in the near future. I think the film starts with "in a few years' time" as a title, and it's got this sort of weird sort of juxtaposition between like this sort of old style village that you'd see in like sort of a Brazilian village, and this sort of like technology as well, because everyone's got smartphones, and like, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's like sort of a drone, and just it's got this weird techno sort of way to it.
Intertwined.
Yeah, like that whole future setting and location is very good. It has this sort of surreal sort of atmosphere. It does remind me of Twin Peaks and sort of David Lynch. And I am honestly, we need to get like a running counter of how many times we mentioned David Lynch. It's just like, it starts off very strange, but the thing is, I love the way information is given out. That's another thing I always say. But it's like everything is told visually. Yeah, there's some sort of dialogue and that, but
it's an organic exposition.
Yeah, everything is told sort of visually, and even like towards the end, we don't actually know we know what's going on, but we don't know the reasons for certain things and like why these are sort of happening. But it feels like it wears its influences on its sleeve. Like there's, like I've mentioned Lynch, there's a Tarantino vibes, Steven Spielberg, that sort of John Carpenter sort of feel, and it even includes a John Carpenter song, which sort of adds to that whole sort of like atmosphere. Also there's the Star Wars style wipes, the sort of,
oh yeah, the transition wipes.
Yeah. It's like it's got them, and also there is a big sort of Western influence on this film. Really loved it because like they start to realise what's going on, like something's not right in the village, so they go and find like a gang to sort of help out. And also the main character is not a nice person. He's a cowboy. Like he's like a gunslinger, and you gotta think this all takes place in the future.
Yeah.
But like, there's a video playing of him going around killing people, and and like that's another thing. It's got this weird sort of like, this village is quite brutal. Like their sort of hero is a guy who's like killed people and all that stuff. But the thing is with that, even though this I'll spoil a little bit, because like I really do think this is one of those films where it is really good to go into it without really knowing anything. But they start to be hunted by these people. Like one day, like someone gets killed and they're like, what's going on? And another day, there's bullet holes in their water supply, and like, there's sort of what's going on here. Even though you kind of know this village, they have this sort of like, they feel very isolated from the rest of the world. And I can't tell you why I think they're quite brutal, but there are some moments where you're like, fuck me. The moral of this story is, you're fucking with the wrong people. That's what I say about this. Do not fuck with this village, because you won't fucking come out of it well, basically. And that's what I mean. It's like, you root for them. You actually want this. You want this community and this village to sort of succeed and overcome what's happening to them. It never holds your hand with what's happening either. It never sort of be like, right, this is what's happening, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. You sort of have to go along with it. There's enough in there to know what's happening. And like I say, all visually, I can just see images in my head of like, oh, that was a good way to sort of connect that to that and connect that to that. And all the performances are really good. I can't remember his name. The sort of main character, Thomas Aquino. I'm probably saying that wrong again. His character is like, he's got that great sort of leading man look, if you know what I mean.
Vernacular sort of.
Yeah. But like the whole, like, when I say like gunslinger and you know, the sort of brooding sort of, you know, and
like a Clint Eastwood sort of.
Yeah,
type.
in a way, yeah. It's, and like the sort of gang leader has got that sort of crazed look about him, where he's just, you know, he's not all
definitely
there.
unhinged, yeah.
Like I say, I don't want to go into it too much because it's one of those.
Does it feel like a sort of spaghetti western?
Yes. I mean, there is like, it's like if you look at it, if you sort of step back from the sort of futuristic element, and you think, well, this is a village which is, there's the corrupt mayor who's come into town and he's said certain things, and that one thing I really do like is that the mayor sort of presents himself as a nice guy because he donates books to him, but he doesn't donate them like a normal person. All that happens is like a big massive like dump truck or rubbish truck, it just dumps a load of books in front of the school, like, and they're all in bad condition. And it's like, it's sort of him doing it. But yeah, if you think like, you've got the mayor, he's a corrupt mayor and he's looking out for himself, you've got these weird things going on, you've got the community coming together, and maybe there might be a shootout or two, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'll leave it there because I really don't want to spoil a lot about this film, because I really did enjoy it, and like I've said, way better to go on it without knowing anything. But yeah, Bacurau, watch it, very good.
Você quer viver ou morrer?
I watched a film called The Stylist. It came out 2 years ago during the peak of the pandemic. It was directed by Jill
Gavarzinian.
Thank you. And starring Najara Townsend and Brea Grant. So we are introduced to this character called Claire. She's a hairdresser. She seems quite lonely, doesn't have much of a social life, very socially awkward as well. She's pretty much like an outcast. So the only way she sort of meets people is through a job. And, you know, she's quite envious of the people. It becomes this sort of weird sort of way of coping, because she's obviously got some serious self-esteem issues. And like with the first kill of the scene, you know, she has this weird vast array of like scalps that she's collected over the years, I'm assuming. And it's like she puts the scalp on and suddenly she doesn't feel so bad about herself. She feels almost like, you know, it's almost like, you know, gratifying. And it's like, it's such a weird, it's a weird premise, but I can kind of see why it was made in the first place. Yeah, the one thing I like about this film, it's like, it's pretty much, you know what you're going to get, but it still delivers anyway. Because it reminds me of a film that I reviewed last time called Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. The whole story is, so Claire gets an offer by one of her customers, which is played by Brea Grant, who's playing Olivia. She has a wedding in June, a couple of weeks, and they sort of form this sort of weird relationship. And it's like, it kind of wants to make Claire this better person, and it gets to a point in the film where she sort of stops killing people for a while, and she eventually locks up her basement, and you know, it's like this is sort of her gateway into sort of becoming a normal person. And there's a sort of like, there's obviously some sort of infatuation with this Olivia person. She not only wants to be Olivia, but she's also in love with her as well. Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. I think because it's so familiar with the sort of idea of Henry's Portrait of a Serial Killer, I kind of knew what was going to happen, so I wasn't really that proper engaged, if I'm honest. But I do think this film's way better than Henry a bit, because the way it's shot looks way better. It's got its own style. There's a sort of weird colour palette with some of the characters, like with Claire, there's a sort of amber colour. Especially when you go inside the basement, there's a sort of weird amber colour lighting, which is nice. I think it's just more of the performances that's okay. It's nothing remarkable. I do like the scenes between Claire and Olivia in terms of like the sort of awkward exchanges. There's a scene where they're both at a club, and it's for some reason Olivia invites her out with her friends at like a hen do thing, and like obviously her friends are like, why is she like, why did she invite a hairdresser? You know what I mean? There's a sort of interaction between Olivia and like obviously Olivia's drunk and Claire's like, okay, and she's sort of confiding him about she's having doubts about the marriage and that, and like the sort of exchange, because it's so you can tell how inexperienced Claire is. It's a really good sort of genuine sort of performance in that aspect, which I quite liked. In terms of what made her this way, we get an idea. I mean, there's a moment where she's sort of talking about, she never had like a father figure. Her mother died pretty young early on in the film, and and she was a hairdresser as well, which obviously made her into what she is today. But there's not really much development in that sort of field, so it's sort of like it's kind of one-dimensional. Yeah. In terms of the serial killer aspect, but it's fine. It's not really that gory, which I was quite surprised as well. The whole scalp removal effect it's pretty simplistic, but it's quite well done, to be fair. Yeah. Because I kind of imagined they must have used like a shower cap or something, and sort of like used makeup and whatnot. And then they must have, because the scissors, I really doubt they'd be using actual scissors. Oh, so they must have used like sort of prop scissors, like sort of plastic. And they must have made the sort of scalp quite easy to sort of tear away. And they must have sort of put like little blood packs inside. So it's a nice little effect there. Also, there's a nice little cameo appearance from the director as well, from Jill. Oh, and she's like the third victim to die. She just sort of randomly, I think she wears like a dress or something, and she sort of walks around and she like goes to a random house. And she goes, "Oh, I need to use your phone, please." And the woman lets her in, and that's the director. Oh, yeah. Which I thought was quite nice.
The ending of the film.
I was just about.
I loved the ending. It's like I knew what was coming, but that sort of let's say reveal at the end.
It's coming, but it's still effectively done well.
Yeah. I remember watching it being like, it's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen. Yeah. And it did. And it didn't feel like, oh, that's gonna happen, and it did. It felt like, oh, they actually fucking did that, and I fucking love it for it.
Oh, I've got to talk about, it's the second kill, and like, I think it was probably intentional, but you can kind of get a sense that, with this relationship that she's formed with Olivia, that Claire's sort of slipping up and getting a bit rusty in terms of the way she's killing people. Well, she goes to a local coffee shop, and there's a woman that you kind of get a sense that there might be a sort of relationship there, but it's not really sort of heavily tread upon. And there's a bit where she goes to her, and then she puts something in a coffee, and then obviously she eventually starts to get knocked out, and then she goes to the body, and then when she starts cutting her head, she starts waking up. But it's like, why would you kill her inside a coffee shop where you'd think there'd be cameras? And then, funny enough, when she gets rid of the body, she puts it in the bin just outside the coffee shop. And you think, bodies stink, man. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, obviously, there's movie logic. You sort of have to go with it. I get that. But the thing is, though, what I didn't understand was that whole, like, that second death scene. Like, it seemed like it was going to be, like, some sort of setup for, like, consequences. And, like, you get, like, a bit where she's in the hairdresser's salon place. And, like, I think the brother of the victim comes out and says, "Oh, have you seen my sister?" And hands him, like, a missing poster and that. And there's a bit when she finds out there's, like, a funeral for her and everything. But it's, like, it's a sort of weird sort of indication. Like, is she going to finally get arrested? But there's nothing really happens. There's no, like, sort of consequences, which I thought was quite weird. Other than that, that's pretty much what I've got to say about The Stylist. I think it's a fine film. Yeah, very well made. That's all I got to say.
What are you
These final two films we're going to be speaking about is Scream 5, also known as just Scream, and Wrong Turn, the reboot, which was released last year, 2021. Scream is directed by Matt Bettinelli Alpin, directed also by Tyler Gillett, written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick, starring the usual Scream lot, which is Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox and David Arquette, but also the newcomers are Melissa Barrera, Jack Quaid from The Boys, and Jenna Ortega. I actually really enjoyed Scream 5. I didn't think I would, but I love the way that it does this sort of like satire of the way horror movies are nowadays. Like, it starts off with and it's got that meta sort of way about it. Plot wise, you know,
Pretty standard.
Yeah, pretty standard. Woodsboro, there's a Ghostface killer on the loose again. So the original team sort of come back, and as well you've got the newcomers, and you know, who's the killer, all that stuff. And you've watched Scream 1 to 3.
I've seen 1 to 3.
Yeah. Do you remember that they used to have a film within the film called Stab, which was based on what happened?
I vaguely remember, yeah.
Well, it has a lot more play in this, because what's happened is this film deals with a lot of like reboots and sequels and unnecessary sequels, and the franchise of Stab has become stale, and there hasn't been one released in a while. It's meta, and it's sort of it's using the film within the film to describe the film you're watching. I really sort of enjoyed that sort of meta way, but the thing was, it's like, I'm gonna spoil a bit of this film because it happened sort of earlier on, and it did throw me off it, but at the end of it I was like, maybe that's the point, because what happens is, it turns out that our new main character is the daughter of Billy Loomis, who was the killer in the first film.
Okay.
And that would be fine, but she actually sees visions of a de-aged Billy Loomis, and it's like fucking Luke Skywalker from The Mandalorian 2, and it's just like.
But it could be intentional there.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
When I first saw that, I was like, fucking, they're gonna deep fake. Like, it's a deep.
This is what I was sort of apprehensive about this film, because is it going to be like The Matrix, where it's going to be like a sort of nostalgic fest, but we're very meta, so it's sort of not.
Yeah. And it's like, but at the same time, you can't sort of forgive it for pointing it out, even though it's still doing it.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah,
because it's like,
just because you're acknowledging it doesn't mean you're not doing the same thing as every. Yeah,
but I like the way that it sort of talks about horror, the way horror has changed from the original Scream, where like, because you know, they all start off with like, what's your favourite scary movie and all that stuff. And like, the girl, Jenna Ortega's character, she's like, what's your favourite horror movie? And she's like, The Babadook.
Duke, it's an amazing meditation on motherhood and grief.
Isn't that a little fancy pants?
Well, it's elevated horror.
What does that mean, elevated horror?
You know, it's like scary, but with complex emotional and thematic underpinnings. It's not just some schlocky cheeseball nonsense with wall-to-wall jump scares.
And then there's mentions of The Witch and Hereditary and all that stuff. But this is what they did in the original film, where they spoke about, like, you know, like,
that's
Texas,
so weird.
Yeah. They talk about like Texas Chainsaw Texas
Halloween.
Chainsaw, all that stuff. So it's kind of like they're redoing it. So I had fun with the film. Like, I can't say I really enjoyed it as much as, say, the first two, because I think the first two are the best ones.
I do like the Scream films.
Yeah. Would you mind if I spoil something quite big about this film? Because I feel like it's to do with like the fan servicey thing.
Go on then.
Dewey gets killed. David
I
Arquette
see.
gets
Yeah.
killed. And that is such a fucking Han Solo moment. Like, you know, when Han Solo gets killed in The Force Awakens. Yeah, it's like, and he doesn't need to fucking die, and it kind of makes me wonder, like, did he sort of like just be like, nah, I'm not doing any more after this? Because I know I know they're making Scream 6, and Neve Campbell's not going to be in it. It's only going to be Courtney Cox from the sort of original team. And I'm kind of like, you know, because David Arquette's not going to be in the next one, is she sort of like, I'm not doing it either?
Yeah.
And it's just like, that was one thing where I was like, it's good that he died, because it sort of brings this sort of element of like, well, who could die, and you know, no one's really
safe.
Yeah, but you know, they kind of are. But that sort of moment was like, they must have watched The Force Awakens. Like, it's very Force Awakens, and that's what it felt like. It felt like you would take a fan favourite character of Dewey and you kill him off. You're like, oh shit. And then it's just like, you're stuck with these new people. But like I say, the new people aren't that annoying. Like, they're all right. You know what I mean? They sort of do fall into the sort of normal traps, I should say, of like, you know, the Instagrammer, the jock and all that stuff, but they're not too much, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Another thing which is fan service is that they all sort of have connections to previous characters from the other film, like Randy, Jamie Kennedy's character, his niece is kind of playing his role. Do you remember his character? He's like the one who's like, you can't go out at night, you can't say this, you can't have sex, you can't, if you say I'll be right back, you'll get killed. And another thing which is really fan service, the sort of climax of the film takes place in the same house as the first film, and they recreate shots from the first film.
Oh, that's a bit.
And it's like, this is what I mean, it's like, it's making me want to watch Scream.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're watching a film, it shouldn't make you want to watch another film. And it's just like,
I was worried it might do that.
Yeah, but it's like, this is what I mean. It's like, is this like the whole sort of meta satire of it, where it's like they even mention, the same house as like 25 years ago. Are you really doing this? And it's like, yeah, but you can't point things out and expect us to be like, oh well, they've pointed it out, so it's fine. It's not fine. It's still kind of, I don't want to say lazy, but it feels that kind of way.
Jamie! Oh shit!
So yeah, that's Scream. It's way more memorable than Scream 4. Like, I know
Still the one in 2010.
Yeah, 2011. Yeah.
2011. Yeah.
It's I honestly can't remember like a lot about Scream 4. I can't remember who the killer was. I can't remember why they were killing. But I feel like in 5 years' time, I'll remember this.
Yeah.
I'll remember what happened. Maybe it's the fan service. Maybe that's why I'll remember a bit more. But I didn't have any expectations, and I was satisfied with what was given to us. And I am looking forward to the next one.
It's an honor.
But I'll just carry on with sort of Wrong Turn, because it's kind of weird how we've both at the same year. Or Wrong Turn was last year, anyway. But it's kind of like at the same time we had both reboots of two franchises, and it's so funny how bad Wrong Turn got it compared to Scream, if you know what I mean. And the only person behind the scenes who's involved with Scream 5 is Kevin Williamson, who wrote the script for the original two films, I think. So, you know, that's the only real... So, to think that, like, you know, there's not many people... I mean, Wes Craven's passed away, hasn't he? So, to think that there's no one really connected to the original films...
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, it's nice that, like, you know, they have done such a good job with it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you could have gave it to, say, Blumhouse, who do a lot of... shit, and like, you know, they could have just rebooted it. Saying that, Blumhouse, I think they did The Invisible Man, which was quite good, but you know,
it's a great film.
Yeah, but going on to Wrong Turn, it's like fucking shit, man. like this is everything, like I've just said, everything that they did right in Scream, they did wrong in The Wrong Turn, because the characters are bland, they're annoying, they're like the typical stereotypical like Instagrammers, but they're actually just really annoying. And another thing as well, why I really didn't like this. Have you watched any of The Wrong Turn?
No.
It's very similar to Hills of Eyes. It's like they get lost in the woods and there's a bunch of creepy inbred hillbillies, cannibal hillbillies. This film chucks all that away. They're not inbred hillbillies. They're like a cult, and they have like a trial, and they have like, you know, a way of life. And it's like, this is so uninteresting compared to like
the original concept.
Yeah, because it's just like we've inbred cannibal hillbillies. It's like, what could happen? They're gonna cut them up and all that stuff. But like, it's like the screenwriter watched The Fucking Witch, and he watched The Lighthouse and was like, how can I turn like how can I turn Wrong Turn into like a Robert Eggers film? And it's like, it doesn't fucking work. It's like, literally, I put here, the cult feels like a faction from fucking Skyrim. That's how they fucking act. They honestly really fucking do. The first hour was alright. Oh, just to add a bit of backstory, the film starts with the father of the main character going to this town. He's like, has anyone seen my daughter? No, blah, blah, blah. Then it goes back and we find out what happens, and then they sort of meet up, if you know what I mean. Like, the two sort of times converge, and it's just like, so what happens to get out of this, to save her friends, and because they're on trial. It's fucking stupid, man. Like, to save her friends, she gives herself to the leader of this cult. She's like, you need a wife, I can bear children, and all that shit. So that's what happens, and then the father finds the cult, they escape, blah blah blah. One of the her boyfriend who's with them, he doesn't want to escape because he feels accepted with this cult. It's like, what? You've been with this cult for 2 months and apparently like this is who you want to be. God, I think if I went into a cult for 2 months, I'd still want to like go home and play PlayStation. You know what I mean? The film, and to be honest, the film is about as gory and probably even less gory than some episodes of The Walking Dead. And like, I'm a fan of The Walking Dead, some of it, and it's like The Walking Dead can be quite fucking gory at times. Like, there's a moment in The Walking Dead where someone's eye, like their head gets smashed in and their eyes like, ugh. And it's like, it's a really brilliant effect. Quite gory for a TV program, but it's just like, this is less gorier than that. All the kills and all the the gory stuff, it happens off screen, and then we see the aftermath. It's like, there's a bit where he gets the cult leader gets a red hot poker and he pokes someone's eyes out. We don't see him poke the eyes out, but then we see the aftermath, which is less gory because
such a weird artistic decision.
I know, it's just like, because like,
it's like you shouldn't try to fix what isn't broken in the first place. And like, why would you not embrace that original concept in the first place?
Yeah. I think you still could have done the weird cannibal hillbillies. And it's like, I'm not a massive fan of the Wrong Turn films. I think I've seen 1 to 3, and they're all they all feel kind of low budget and a bit, but like, this is what I mean. They're fun films.
Yeah.
But there's not much else I really want to say about it. Oh, how could I forget? This has one of the worst endings to a film I've ever fucking seen. Like, I could not fucking believe how much they fucked up the ending. Like, it was already a bad film, but this ending was fucking terrible.
Did it fill you up with rage?
It filled me with rage. Literally, what happens is the father and daughter escape from the cult, and I don't know if it says like 2 months later or something. And then she's on her way home, and she gets home, and she's pregnant because she's become pregnant from the cult leader. And she gets home, and sitting there with her, I think it's her stepmom and her brothers. He's there, the cult leader. And then what happens is, she grabs a knife and she goes to attack him, and everyone's like, what's going on? But as she does that, he stabs her brother, her other brother, and her stepmom. And I was just like, nah, to be fair though, at the time I was like, fucking, for an ending, that's a bit fucking brutal. I was like, fair play for that fucking brutal ending. Guess what, Arnold? It's a fucking dream sequence.
Oh my fucking
No,
God.
he's actually there, but that doesn't happen. That was all in her head. And I was just like, you could have saved this film just a bit by having a really dark ending where her family have all been fucking killed and she's carrying her fucking child.
What a way to shoot yourself in the foot,
no,
man.
yeah. But then it just
Fucking
cuts to
hell.
like, what did she say?
Was she like this?
Yeah. And it's just like, because there's a bit where like, and I thought, what the fuck? Like, there's a bit like after he's like killed the family where the mum or stepmom has been killed, and she's like, I can't remember what the fucking woman's name is, like, Amanda or something, and he's just like, Amanda, and like it cuts to like the girl like, yeah, and then we see that nothing's happened, and then what happens is that she's like, right, the cult leader like says, if you don't come with me, I'm going to kill everyone. So she goes with him. Credits come up, directed by whatever, and then while the credits are going on, we see a scene because they're in a caravan. We see the caravan like crash, and someone crawls out and they get stabbed, and it's her, and she's killed them all. And it's just like, why did you wait to the fucking end credits to show us the actual ending of the film, instead of like, you spent at least like a few minutes showing us this cop-out ending which isn't even real, when you could have just showed us the real ending. But yeah, I'm sorry, we've had some really good films this episode, but But that just fucking...
You've had to end it with a diabolical piece of mess.
I know, yeah. Oh, God. Really bad. I feel quite down now. We've had a really good time today. We've spoke about some good films, and we have to end it with the wrong turn. Fucking reboot, which was
Looks like you did a wrong turn there.
I don't get it.